Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm having a little technical difficulties because I forgot the pay the cable bill. But
yeah,
I have to fire my business manager.
This is different from the technical difficulties I just witnessed, you mean?
Yes.
You got broadband access problems?
Temporarily today, and I also don't know what to wear for Halloween. Last year I went as the Bradley effect. Very high concept costume.
Yeah.
And nobody got it, but that was good because they couldn't see me because I was covered in a big hood. I need a similarly high concept costume for this year, and I can't think of one.
Well, maybe you should turn it upside down. You remember the Carvel's ice cream place in New Jersey? They had these two cakes. They had the whale of a dad cake for Father's Day, and it was in the shape of a whale. And then for Christmas, they had a Santa's cap thing. If you look closely, it was just the exact same cake, just oriented differently. They could turn a whale into a Santa's cap by turning the cake around. And so maybe what does the Bradley effect look like upside down?
It looks like the Bradley effect. The Bradley effect was like a blue and white sheet, and to illustrate the Bradley effect, the sheet turned from blue to red.
Well, this time go from red to blue. That'll
but
totally
that's not
freak
what's happening. The landscape is not becoming more blue; it's becoming slightly more red.
I think we've solved your problem, Mickey.
I don't know. I was thinking of going as the Uncanny Valley.
What's the Uncanny Valley? Does that just prove that I'm out of it once again?
No, apparently the Uncanny Valley is that when monsters are really horrible, they don't scare us, and when they become close to human, they start scaring us because they seem uncanny. So zombies scare us because they're close to humans, whereas horrible werewolves with fangs don't scare us.
Right.
And the Uncanny Valley is the dip in the graph. So instead of going as a zombie, I was going to go as the dip in the graph itself. Clever, right?
I think you gravitate toward the abstract a little more than is optimal, Mickey.
Okay.
I would just go as the zombie, I think, and explain this interesting Uncanny Valley.
Well, they already know it. These are Hollywood people. They're sick of the Uncanny Valley.
Okay, so then what, you would make yourself look like a valley with no cans or something? How would you operationalize it?
I haven't quite figured out how to illustrate it.
Okay.
That one might not work. Maybe I'll just wear my Al Gore mask again.
That one never fails to please in my experience, Mickey.
Yeah.
So, were you excited about the World Series?
No. Both the Los Angeles teams got shut out, man.
Yeah, is that why you lost interest? I'm right in the middle of it.
You are, and it's good for John Corzine, of course, because it means that everybody in New Jersey
drives right by my house on the way.
No, that's not what it means.
No?
It means they won't pay attention to insurgent third-party candidate Chris Daggett.
I see. So you're more interested in the New Jersey governor's race than I am, assuming it is the governor's race, just to show you how untuned in I am.
Are you planning to vote?
No, not this year. I only do the big ones. I only do it when, you have some major, first black president, that kind of thing.
You're not even voting in the governor of your state? A key off your election?
You are correct, sir.
But your vote will be interpreted as a slap at Obama.
Oh, really? Oh, well, now that you put it that way.
If Corzine loses, that's the one thing that could derail health care. And, of course,
Okay, it's not too late for me to go. I can just show up, right? When is the election? Is it today?
No, it's next Tuesday, Bob.
Oh, boy. With citizens like me, it's a wonder that America's not in worse shape,
Really?
Yeah, but just briefly, don't you think the Yankees are un-American, the New York Yankees? I mean, the way they leverage their wealth and their massive media market into the purchase of the finest talent and the finest steroids across the land, and so monopolize, isn't that kind of un-American?
No, although I thought they didn't quite do that this year. But is their payroll higher than the Phillies?
Oh, I'm sure. I think it may be the highest in baseball.
Really?
It's the way they operate, and it's just entrenched privilege, and it's antisocial mobility, which you favor.
On the other hand, Derek Jeter is a great leader.
Yeah, but then you got Alex Rodriguez, the anti-Derek Jeter. in terms of character, likability, and known steroid use.
That's true. You got a yin and yang.
Or I should say suspected steroid use, technically. Or no, he acknowledged doing something and claimed it was a mistake, right, as they always do. Anyway.
The one I don't like is Kate Hudson.
Kate Hudson?
Can't she ever fall for somebody who's not famous?
Why? Who was she with? Was she with A-Rod?
You bet. She was.
What's he doing with her?
I think I saw.
I mean, she wouldn't. She's also anti-meritocratic. I mean, and she's also the epitome of entrenched privilege. I mean, would she be known as an actress if her mother weren't Goldie Hawn? Come on.
There you go.
So this is a match made in heaven. The Yankees and Kate Hudson.
Oh, but she seems sort of likable. But why? I mean, she's constantly like keeping herself on the cover of People magazine by going out and breaking up, and
because she knows the game, man.
Owen Wilson attempted suicide, and instead of poor Owen Wilson, was it Kate who caused him to try to commit suicide? I mean,
oh God,
insane publicity hog. That's my line. Anyway, but she was in the movie you like, so you should forgive her.
What movie was that?
You know that movie about the rock star by...
Almost Famous?
Yeah.
That was an underrated movie, yes.
She was the babe in that.
I think the reason that got bad reviews is because the critics had gotten burned going out on a limb for Vanilla Sky, and they didn't want to stand by what's his name again, the director of both of those movies.
Well, there you go. You should come out here and and be a film critic. You could take the town by storm.
Vanilla Sky, I think, is a great movie, though.
Really?
Yeah, Cameron Crowe is his name.
Which version?
What?
Which version?
The American, you mean, as opposed to
there was a year
Abre los ojos? Which is good, too.
Yeah, okay. So here's the thing.
Yeah?
I decided I sort of don't really like Obama. I mean, as a person. I mean, every time you see him, he's giving some pompous speech off the teleprompter with his chin up, sort of lecturing us. You have no sense. It's not spontaneous. You have no sense you're piercing to the real man. And that guy you see at the teleprompter is just not that likable. I'm sure he is likable in person, so why doesn't he convey that? But he just, it's hard for me to love the guy.
Why are you sure he's likable in person?
Well, people say that. The little cameos I've seen, like where he says that Kanye West was a jackass and, joking around with reporters. He seems like an ordinary guy. I mean, the most likable people have been sort of jerks, very famously cold jerks really at their core, FDR and JFK. I'm not talking about what he's like at his core. I'm just asking for a level out beyond that, a level more superficial than his core. What he presents to the public needs to be more likable. I mean, John Kerry is probably a nice guy too, but what he presents to the public is this aloof, cold flip-flopper.
I think Obama's a much more credible public speaker than Kerry.
Well, sure, but all he is now is a credible public speaker. You just have no sense that this is a guy you want to follow in a battle.
Whereas George Bush, you felt like you were seeing the real core, such as it was, and
exactly.
I don't know. Forced to choose, I would take Obama.
I would too, but all I'm saying is that there is that contrast.
And do you join in the chorus of condemnation for his playing in all-male basketball games? Did you see that piece?
Was it all-male basketball games or golf games?
Well, no, golf was the makeup call. I mean, well, it had been golf. The original story was largely about basketball, and then the next thing you know, after this, I guess, piece in the Times, was it? He's playing a round of golf that includes some female staffer.
Yeah.
But I think they acknowledged it was the first time a female had played in one of his golf matches since he was president.
I think he plays basketball at a fairly high level, and it's hard to recruit women who are good enough to play at that high level. Now, I don't know how bad the worst man in that game was. I used to play basketball in Washington, and there were a few good women players.
We played together once, remember?
Yeah.
Remember those days?
Julius Janikowski, actually, the head of the FCC, is a good ball player. Point guard.
Mm-hmm.
But so you could play with him, but he's not a woman. But there were women who played in those games, and they didn't. they were better than the worst man in the game, so it was fine.
In Washington that you played in?
At the Y, yeah. There were a couple.
I was never in those, man.
But so he'd have to recruit one of them, but it probably wouldn't be a member of his staff. So I totally defend the all-male basketball.
Okay.
What about you?
I have no comment.
What do you mean you have no comment?
No, I mean I think people have a right to play. Well, different sports are different. I was going to say yes. I mean, good basketball can depend on confining it to pretty good players. There are some, women who could play at that level, but there probably aren't many at the White House who have either the interest or the ability. Now, golf is different because golf is a game that's designed, well, not designed, but it works with players of radically uneven abilities. It's at the opposite end of the spectrum from tennis in that regard. Tennis is horrible unless you're very evenly matched. Golf can be great if there's great disparity. So golf is where he should make his makeup call, which is what he's doing.
Yeah, I think you just said what I said.
Yeah, okay, but we digress, Mickey. What about this healthcare thing?
Well, the healthcare thing, I claim eerie prescience, I think on Blogging Heads a few...
Wait, didn't you say it wasn't going to pass this year at some point?
Well, it's still not. I still don't think it's going to pass this year, but I think it's going to pass.
You still don't, really? But you're in a minority in that now, right?
I don't think so. People are becoming confirmed that something is going to pass. They're not. I think that conventional wisdom is shifting toward next year rather than by the end of the year.
Oh, no. Because it could fall totally apart by then.
No, it's not going to fall apart, I don't think. It could, but...
How do people know these things? I mean, that's what I don't get.
It's looking more...
3 weeks ago...
It's looking
3
more...
weeks ago, it was like, no way it's going to pass this year, certainly not with the public option. Now it's like, could well pass this year, quite possibly with the public option. I mean, what has changed objectively?
Well, first, the public option is still up. First, I claim that I predicted on this show a few months ago that federalism was the solution for the public option, not a trigger, but state by some formula where you let states. I was thinking numerical terms, let 5 states, 10 states do it. They're thinking opt-in, opt-out. Right now it's opt-out, so the default position is you got a public option. So
can you explain
that's their solution for getting it through through the Senate, but. And you figure if it's in the Senate bill, it's certainly in the House bill, it's going to be in the final bill. But, it's not clear that it's going to be in the Senate bill. Lieberman just announced that he was not going to vote for cloture if it's in the bill. So that sort of makes getting to 60 without a Republican impossible for the Democrats.
Wasn't his shtick to pretend that he's a liberal on domestic issues so that he could be a hawk on...
Yes, I think that shtick is coming apart.
It's gone. He's permanently alienated. Okay.
Well,
bye-bye, Joe.
No, not bye-bye, because he's going to vote for the bill. But this is definitely
Okay, but can you explain to me why would a state want to opt out? Is there any big burden on the states fiscally?
Well, keep in mind that what they're opting out of is not setting up a state program. It is joining a national program. So no, you would think. There wouldn't, except the private insurers lobby. I'm just making this up, but the private insurance lobby in each state would worry that the public option would somehow drive them out of business. I think we don't know whether it'll drive them out of business because the public option is going to have to take all the sickest people who the private insurers don't want to insure, and its costs are actually going to be higher. So we don't know if it's going to be a adverse selection process that causes the public option to be more expensive as the insurer of last resort. But the private insurers and the doctors, private insurers will be worried that they're going to go out of business. The doctors will be worried that the public option is going to turn the screws on them. Maybe they'll have some objections to whatever formula they're paid for, and they're going to be pouring money into state legislatures to try to bribe state legislators into opposing it. So I think it'll be a battle royal in some states. It'll be not a battle royal in most liberal states.
I know, it's kind of hard to imagine. You would think that the citizens in every state, just hearing about the thing, would say, yeah, I'd rather have more options than fewer, right? You would think it would be a tough one for the politicians to sell, no matter how strong the insurance lobbying.
Yes, I agree, now that I think of it.
But that's where it matters whether it's an opt-out or an opt-in, too, right? I mean, who's going to lead the vote to opt out if the citizens already have it, right?
I guess it does make a big difference, yes. Although, there'll be some, the insurance lobby and the doctors lobby are pretty resourceful. It seems to me they could
probably... This may be the pivot, because some conservatives are saying they could live with opt-in but not opt-out.
Yeah, and it may
for this very reason.
It may end up opt-in because, everybody's making a big deal of, it's going to be in the bill. Harry Reid doesn't have the 60 votes necessarily to pass it with the opt-out, so this may just be a show to the left that he's given it a try, and then when it fails, they will move to opt-in, and then if opt-in fails, because Joe Lieberman doesn't vote for it, and Olympia Snow doesn't vote for it, then they'll try the Olympia Snow trigger. Maybe that'll pass. And if that doesn't pass, they'll pass it without a public option, and then there'll be some compromise with the House that maybe will restore an opt-in or out. So we'll get some formula, some variation on those. But I guess my point is I'm not sure that the public option is a stalking horse for Medicare. It might be better than Medicare. You have a government plan and you have private insurers to keep it honest. And you limit its ability to turn the screws on doctors and cut costs, which doesn't bother me. So I'm pretty happy about the way things are going.
And are you saying that all that happened to shift the conventional wisdom on the feasibility of all this is somebody figured out that the opt-out thing would allow them to sneak the public option in?
Well, no, because it might not work that way.
So what happened over the last 3 weeks that emboldened the Democrats?
Well, I think what happened is that the polls. I guess Dick Morris was right. Dick Morris says if it's 55-45 against, which is it's actually about 50-45 against the polls, the Democrats are going to go ahead and do it. What people were worried about was that there was so much anger out there that it was going to be 60-40 against, and then it would be too risky for Democrats, and there was going to be an explosion of populist outrage, like these Tea Parties in August, and Corzine in New Jersey, where you're not going to vote, but other people would vote, was going to go down, and every Democratic office holder was going to worry that if they voted for this thing, they were going to lose. And it doesn't look like the anger against it is that great. I think that's the big thing that happened. The polls didn't completely crater. They sort of leveled off. It's not popular, but it's not unpopular enough for the Democrats.
And did Obama's little speaking tour help in that regard? What moderated the polls?
You could say that. I mean, since I thought it was a stupid idea, I'm
not only that, you just spent a couple of minutes. You just spent a couple of minutes belittling the guy's rhetorical skills. I would say it's time for an apology.
No, I didn't belittle his rhetorical skills. I think that's all he has, and that a president who only has rhetorical skills is not likable.
No, but you said even that you said watching him read the teleprompter, isn't inspiring. Didn't you say that?
Well, I think that's right. Yes.
Well, apparently it works for somebody, but I guess you're better and more discerning than the average American, Mickey.
Well, it may turn out that the speech to Congress was all he needed. I thought he needed a major reboot because I thought he scared seniors enough so that they were implacably opposed to the bill and would take it out on Democrats in the midterms. Obviously, the Democrats aren't worried about that. So, yes, I could have been wrong. But I don't think the speech didn't seem like such a turning point to me.
Yeah. Okay.
But maybe it turned. Maybe it. Maybe the opposition will just fade into the woodwork. The obvious key thing is he hasn't talked about bending the cost curve by denying his mother hip replacements for a few months. So people have forgotten that kind of talk.
There isn't going to be any of that in this kind of plan. There isn't going to be that kind of constraint. Unless the public option is designed that way, but people aren't going to be coerced into the public option.
Well, there is going to be this cost-cutting panel that's going to recommend changes, which when supporters of it were talking in grandiose terms about how it's going to end fee-for-service medicine and start denying end-of-life care, it scared the hell out of people. Now people are realizing that it's really going to not have that much power at all, and the political system won't accept the vicious cuts that were scaring people, And once people realize that, then they're fine with it, which I think is sort of what's happening. As long as they don't talk about how we need to have a difficult democratic conversation about restricting end-of-life care, then people are fine with a cost-cutting panel that needs approval from Congress because they know they're not going to cut costs that much. I mean, so the whole cost-cutting thing is a bit of a charade, which is fine, so it's going to pass.
Well, speaking of American lives, Mickey, what do you think about this Afghanistan thing?
Well, I want to know what you think. I mean, it seems to me that Joe Biden, if, as I suspect you are, what you're worried about is America's presence being counterproductive and our airstrikes killing people, which only stokes further rage at the United States. The Joe Biden reduce the number of troops, focus on counterterrorism strategy seems completely ill-conceived to stop that kind of anger. It's going to produce more of that anger because remote airstrikes are what piss people off. At least if we put in more troops, we can give something that people appreciate, which is security, to counterbalance the inevitable number of innocent people we kill.
But I think it goes well. The problem with our presence, I think, goes well beyond the innocent people we kill. You saw this story in the Washington Post about this guy Matthew Ho, who resigned. He was the highest-ranking American civilian in a province in Afghanistan. He had served in Iraq earlier as a captain in the Marine Corps. And he wrote this really, I thought, impressive letter of resignation that called my attention to some things that had kind of escaped me. And one is that basically what's going on is there has been a long-standing, according to him, for decades, basically, a kind of tension and even civil war between these rural Pashtuns and these urban elites who represent modernity. And we're kind of in the middle of that, and by virtue of that, we come to symbolize to the rural Pashtuns, everything they hate. I mean, we become, apparently there's this big narrative in their ethnicity about, not just decades, but I think centuries of kind of, foreigners and outsiders trying to mess with their culture, and some of those outsiders are these Afghans, and these urban Afghans, but now we are among those outsiders, and so I think that part is not about the civilians we kill. But it's bad for us.
That's interesting, but shouldn't we then send in troops to at least protect the urban elites against the Taliban?
Why? I mean, first of all, he says in this letter that these rural Pashtuns don't especially identify. Here's what he says. He says, I have observed that the bulk of the insurgency fights not for the white banner of the Taliban, but rather against the presence of foreign soldiers and taxes imposed by an unrepresentative government in Kabul.
Well,
this isn't. According to him, it's really not. It's not predominantly Taliban energy that's opposed to these elites, but moreover, why is it our responsibility to protect urban elites everywhere? Where does that come from?
Well, I don't understand. So what would you do? You want to pull out completely?
I'm not sure what Plan B is, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, there's some other reasons that I'm really coming to doubt Plan A. Another one is that there was a woman on Blogging Heads that I had a dialogue with, Ann Marlowe, who's a journalist. Very supportive of the counterinsurgency strategy, identifies herself as a neocon. And I said, listen, it seems to me, before we send a whole bunch of troops over there in numbers that might successfully impose counterinsurgency strategy on the whole country, could we establish that we can make counterinsurgency strategy work on a smaller scale? Surely we have enough troops to demonstrate that, right? So I said, is there anyone in the entire Pashtun belt, which is any place in the entire Pashtun belt, which is where the trouble is, where counterinsurgency strategy has enduringly worked? In other words, the area was chaotic, we imposed order, the order lasted. And she said no. There was a place called Post KHOST, where by her account, although I think there's controversy over this, and I think the Army's account, counterinsurgency strategy did work, but then there was a relapse. Okay, so if we can't even demonstrate on a small scale that in this environment counterinsurgency strategy can work enduringly, which has to be the case, then I don't get the logic behind sending more troops over to do it on a larger scale.
Well, I think the logic is the McChrystal strategy abandons these rural areas. We don't have these outposts that just exist to get shelled and attacked. We let the Taliban have their rural areas and protect the urban areas. That's the logical strategy, the logic of the strategy, but we need more troops to protect the urban areas. I guess Kandahar would be the big, where the rubber meets the road in that strategy.
But here's one thing I don't get. I mean, I thought, like, the premise of trying to deny, Taliban/Al-Qaeda to the extent that it is that, trying to deny them big parcels of turf was that there's something about their occupying big parcels of turf that made them pose a threat to us they wouldn't otherwise pose, right? I mean, that's a question that needs to be addressed, too. Are these terrorists really more threatening to the United States by virtue of occupying large chunks of land? But anyway, if you're saying the premise behind our ongoing involvement in Afghanistan, I think, is that the answer is yes. Well, if the answer is yes, and you're saying give them all the rural areas, isn't that enough turf for them to do whatever damage turf allows them to do?
There's a difference between giving them all the rural areas and giving them the whole country. I mean, if we withdraw, the winners in the rural areas are not going to be these local tribesmen. They're going to be the Taliban. The Taliban have taken over the country before. They'll take over those parts of the country again, whatever these local tribesmen want. Second, the idea that the Taliban is different from Al-Qaeda is a convenient myth that has sprung up at this point.
It's not a myth, Mickey. It is not a myth. You're saying they're really the same?
No, but if you read what Peter Bergen has written, and if you read the account of David Rhodes' captivity,
there is some
symbiosis. And Al-Qaeda are now welded more than ever.
Well, maybe so. There is some symbiosis between them, but to say that it's a myth to say they're not the same is to say something else, which I don't think you actually do want to defend.
No, but it just so happens that when people wanted to pull out of Afghanistan, all of a sudden we were told, oh, well, the Taliban is where we can wean the Taliban away from Al-Qaeda, and people like Peter Bergen, who know more than I do, say that's horse manure. And David Rhodes, who was captive, said he talked to the Taliban people, and they sure seem to be in sync with Al-Qaeda. And they sure seem to want to have grander ambitions than just taking over the Pashtun areas of Afghanistan. So it makes a big difference whether the Taliban gets some rural areas, and we can send in missile strikes every now and then if we want, or whether they march on Kabul and take over the whole country. And if what
can they do if they take over the whole country?
What will they do?
Yeah.
Well, I assume they'll do what they did before.
Which is wait, no.
Have training camps and blow up the World Trade Center is what they did.
No, all they did before was let Al-Qaeda have some training camps that were arguably of some use in blowing up the World Trade Center, but in any event, there would be plenty of room for training camps in your scenario where we give them the rural areas.
Well, it seems to me that it's a difference
the question
if they
is,
have the whole...
do the instruments of state pose some kind of big threat? And I would say in Pakistan, yes, because it means nuclear weapons. But, another thing that has not been established to me is that they're taking over Afghanistan, which would actually exacerbate the problem in Pakistan. Counterintuitive as it sounds, it could have the opposite effect.
I was thinking that,
because a bunch of them would leave Pakistan to go to Afghanistan.
I was thinking, wouldn't it be a relief valve? Yes, I was...
I know, and you raise that question, and people kind of shudder and go, "Are you crazy?" But nobody ever has an answer for it.
Those are two.
I haven't heard anyone sketch out the detailed way in which the synergy works in the other direction, where all these Taliban people leave Pakistan for Afghanistan, and then they're running the place, and somehow that makes things worse in Pakistan. It could be. But I'd like to hear how that works.
So your strategy is basically pull out, let the Taliban take over the Afghan government, and what's so bad about that?
No, that's not a strategy I'm advocating. All I'm saying is that right now, I'm in a process where I'm trying to learn more and more about this, and I'm saying so far what I've learned in the last couple of weeks, interrogating this woman who's an expert on Afghanistan, reading this letter from this guy who's an expert in Afghanistan. People should really read the letter. I'm just saying I am definitely leaning against increasing the American troop presence there. There are just so many assumptions underlying this that are not examined, you know?
Well, Bob, you're talking like an irresponsible politician during the Vietnam War. I'm against increasing the troop levels. Well, what are you for? What are the consequences of your course of action? And then you say, oh, I'm learning, it's under further study. Well, no, it's not good enough. He has to make the decision in the next month.
No, I actually don't. I'm not in charge. I don't have to make the decision. I'm allowed to make up my mind slowly. Well, where are you? What are you? You tell me, where are you? You support sending what? 40,000, 60,000? What's the Mickey Mouse plan?
I support sending more troops, giving it a try, and then we can always withdraw later, yeah.
Giving it a try. Well, what's wrong with giving it a try with the tons of troops we've already got there and demonstrating that you could make counterinsurgency enduringly work on a reasonably sized piece of turf, which apparently hasn't happened yet?
Because it's not working with the tons of troops we have there. Everybody agrees that it's not working with the tons of troops we have there. Here's what I'm saying. If you're saying like 150,000 troops or whatever could do all of Afghanistan, right? That's the plan. Well, then take the troops with, the half of that number, whatever, troops we've got over there, and just show us and focus them on a small area and show that it works. I don't think the plan is to do all of Afghanistan.
Well, you understand the principle? I mean, it seems to me the burden of proof...
Your principle works for welfare reform, have demonstration projects to show that it works. It's not clear that we have the time to show demonstration projects in an actual shooting war. So
you're going to err on the side of overcommitment.
Yes, correct. The Powell Doctrine.
And there's another thing that was illuminated by this letter. I don't think I already said this, but you always raise this question like the problem is that these fundamentalist Muslims intrinsically are antagonized by modernity, right? It's going to be hard to avoid that friction, right?
Well, I think you've made that point today.
Okay, but did I also make the point, I guess I did, you tell me, that, the fear looming behind that is that America is always the face of modernity to them because America is Hollywood. Well, one thing I realized is that if we weren't involved in Afghanistan, the face of modernity to these rural Pashtuns would be urban Afghans, okay? So we've got a situation... if we don't have troops over there, where for once we are not the face of modernity. There's apparently this long-standing tension between the past and the future, and it's an intra-Afghan struggle. And you're saying, we should go over there and more fully identify with the modernity and that the Pashtuns find so threatening.
Well,
I'm not sure that's a good...
We're still going to be the face of modernity in Pakistan, where there are a lot of Pashtuns.
Well, fine, but maybe so, but Pakistan's got nuclear weapons, and it's a little more worth paying various kinds of prices.
And Al-Qaeda is not so...
Although, Pakistan's a mess, too, because I think, anyway.
Al-Qaeda is not so stupid that they won't think of another reason to... They won't be able to keep us as the face of modernity foremost in people's minds just because we withdraw from Afghanistan. That seems... We weren't in Afghanistan before 9/11 when the Taliban were in charge. Yet somehow they attacked us. I don't know why. Why didn't they attack
the Taliban? Wait. The Taliban did not attack us, Mickey.
The Taliban made an alliance with Al-Qaeda, which did attack us, and the alliance apparently is stronger than ever.
Al-Qaeda attacked us, and there's actually some doubt as to how enthusiastic the Taliban government itself was about that. The last time I checked, it was certainly not some kind of fist and glove kind of thing or whatever the metaphor is.
Well, I think it was an alliance welded by large sums of cash.
You seem intent on blurring what is in fact to some degree still a distinction between the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda, however symbiotic they've become.
But reports from the field, which I have cited, Rode and Bergen, say that the distinction is less strong than ever. It is that they are more closely allied than they were before 9/11, not less closely allied.
Okay, and that comes in the wake of years and years of the policy you're saying we should continue. Is it possible that the policy itself has been conducive to that? I mean, of course, if we stay there and make ourselves the enemy of the Taliban, then Al-Qaeda, which already considers us the enemy, is going to have a closer natural alliance with the Taliban? Have you considered the possibility that this effect would actually be lessened if we changed our policy?
No, yeah, that might happen. I'm not saying it's an open and shut question. I'm saying that we can try it and then withdraw, but we can't withdraw and then try it. So why not do the solution that lets us try both options?
Well, if the evidence is that on balance, trying it would be a worse thing than, and I'm not advocating, withdrawal, and this guy Matthew Ho is not advocating withdrawal, but I'm saying, as we reassess, do we have to be pouring in tens of thousands of more troops if there's real reason to believe that the troops are a big part of the problem?
What? So you're not withdrawing? So we have like 50,000 troops there in a losing cause. We still piss off the rural population by bombing them. That seems like the worst of both worlds.
What would cheer me up is if Obama did the following, which he definitely will not have the political, either gumption or recklessness to do. If he said, we are giving General McChrystal 0 additional troops now for the next 6 months, and we would like to study his we encourage him to implement his counterinsurgency doctrine and show it at work. That's what would make me happy.
But he has written a long memo as to why this won't work.
Nicky, generals always want more troops, and people tasked with assignments always want more resources. That is totally irrelevant. The fact that the general in command wants lots of resources is just not germane. I could have told you that he would want that. How many troops does a general want? More.
Sounds like
How many did they want in Vietnam? More. That was going to do it.
Sounds like a real morale builder for our troops. No, we're not sending you any more help.
Oh, that's my job, Nicky, is to build morale for our troops.
Well, I think it is the job of the president to keep morale up, yes, especially if you want to have success.
Oh, wait. So to keep morale up, the president should always send more troops whenever a general asks for them, to keep morale up.
Well, I think telling a general, no, sorry, we're not going to send you any more troops, we send enough troops, doesn't send a very good message to.
Oh, so it's about that. It's just for morale.
That's part of it. Well, that's part of it. Sure.
The guy's commander-in-chief, Mickey. I mean, it's his job to decide. And McChrystal does not deserve positive reinforcement for stepping out of line and going public with what should have been intramural debates. That's really unprofessional.
Well, your solution sounds like a recipe for a quagmire. Keep things the way they are. Things are going to hell the way they are.
No, it probably would lead to eventual withdrawal, but it would not be hasty.
No, there'd be a long period of pain and humiliation before the eventual withdrawal.
On a smaller scale than what may well happen here.
I think I prefer President Obama to President Wright.
Well, that's progress. You didn't start out the dialogue sounding that way.
I didn't say I like President Obama. I think he's going to send McChrystal some troops, not as many as he wants.
He's going to send him about 20,000 troops.
Exactly. Just the way Bush didn't send Petraeus all the troops he wanted, and McChrystal's going to have to make do with the 20,000. And as people point out there...
I'll tell you, I haven't heard many good arguments from you, I got to say. I mean, you're ridiculing me for, thinking this thing through rather than having a blueprint. And your clearly thought out blueprint is whatever a general asks for, you send him the troops. If he asks for them, you send him.
My blueprint is the Tom Ricks strategy. Give security to the cities and be Joe Biden in the countryside. Countryside, let the Taliban have it, and we send in missiles every time we think there's a meeting of their leaders. Cities, we try to provide security so that we're seen as actually doing something for the people as opposed to just...
So that becomes like an eternal thing for the rest of eternity? We are bombing the rural areas of Afghanistan?
No, in the meantime, the Pakistanis are going at them from the other side of the border, and then we see what happens.
They're going at them? What, Pakistanis are going to invade the rural areas of Afghanistan?
No, the Pakistanis are invading the rural areas of Pakistan where the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are hiding out. There's a huge operation.
Well, that'll just lead them to populate the rural areas of Afghanistan more densely.
Well, it might weaken them so that these independent tribesmen you talk about decide to be independent tribesmen and set up their own fiefdoms, and the separation that you talk about reasserts itself. We don't know. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's the strategy.
And maybe I'll win the lottery. There's a lot of good things that could happen.
I don't know. Tom Ricks knows more than both of us.
You keep pointing to these people who know more than both of us. There's people who know more than both of us on all sides of this. There's Rory Stewart, who walked all the way across Afghanistan. There's this guy who just resigned. I mean, quit appealing to authority like that. You can find any argument you want from people who know a hell of a lot more than we know.
I think you were saying I had no authority, and I'm saying I do. That's all I'm saying.
You win. Let's move on to something you may be right about. What would that be?
You think that just cheap scoring will carry you through here, Bob?
What?
You think cheap scoring will carry you through?
Was that what I just exuded?
I think you
cheap scoring? Was that segue too disrespectful?
Yes, totally.
Okay, let me rephrase it. Let me rephrase it.
Sneering tone.
Let me rephrase it. Mickey, having been trounced in our previous debate, I would like to move on to another subject.
Better blatant than latent.
In which I have a prayer of prevailing.
There you go. Which subject is the war against Fox?
I guess. Oh. Now that, I'm for escalation in that.
Well, we can be quick about that. There are like 500 competing theories as to why Obama declared war on Fox, and he definitely started it. He could have just kept on just ridiculing them and ignoring them. One is that he wants to cauterize them so that the mainstream press doesn't pick up on any more Acorn stories or Van Jones stories. The other is he wants to somehow triangulate so that and marginalize them so that it identifies Republicans with extremists in Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh, which has been a consistent strategy of his. The problem is, another is he wants to, by triangulating, appeal to independents. Well, the problem there is that by declaring war on Fox, he looks sort of hysterical, not moderate. So he's probably alienating independents. Another is he wants to placate the liberal base, which he's about to betray by doing things like sending General McChrystal 20,000 more troops, and not giving them a public option, but of course they're now getting a public option, so what does he need to placate them? My theory is that it's all about money, that the fundraising wasn't working, he wasn't during this off-year election, and he needed to gin up his web fundraising, which has been sort of the mainstay of his fundraising, and the cheapest way to do that is to declare war against Fox, and to tell people to give him money, and that'll keep Glenn Beck at bay. And if my theory is right, that means this war against Fox will end as soon as the 2009 fundraising cycle ends. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's about to happen.
So it's a testable hypothesis.
Well, no, because you could say that the war would wind down anyway, either because it was, he was losing it, or because he'd made the point and he's cauterized them. The problem with the cauterizing theory is if Fox comes up with a good story like Acorn or Van Jones, the mainstream press is going to run with it. And if they come up with crazy stories like Obama's non-existent college thesis and the fact that school children singing makes us like North Korea, they're not going to run with it. So I don't quite see what this theory. I don't quite see how this campaign has stopped Jill Abramson of the New York Times from running with a good Fox story. If it presents itself.
No, it's odd. I mean, usually when a White House does something that's plainly tactical like this, it's not long before there is a conventional wisdom that's kind of known to be right about what they were up to, It's strange.
It is strange.
I don't... that there are no good explanations. But but in the course of this, you've developed your own grand theory of Fox that got a little bit of blowback from the right, right?
A little bit.
I mean, you have this idea that on the question of whether Fox is qualitatively different in its bias from other news outlets, your big thing about kind of the valid reason to be skeptical of Fox is not bias but lack of independence. I mean, you see it as actually enthrall to the party machine or something.
Well, my theory was that sure, Fox is biased, it's horribly biased, but everybody's biased a bit. Fox is just more so. It's not really that much more biased than MSNBC at this point. But it is different in nature in that MSNBC is at least independent, or it toes the line that General Electric sets, but General Electric is itself independent, whereas Roger Ailes, who's founded Fox and has been running Fox its entire existence. Really, when the Republicans were in power, Karl Rove could call them up and say, take this guy off the air, and Ailes would take him off the air. So he did follow orders in a way that an independent news organization would, even MSNBC, would not follow orders. MSNBC would say, well, sorry, we run our own network, and thanks for your advice. Or other people might be less diplomatic, but Ailes really was a tool of the Bush White House. And the other sense in which that was reinforced was the immigration debate and the Harriet Miers debate, where initially Fox totally toed the line of the Bush White House against conservatives and tried to say, oh, this immigration reform is a great thing, and they even tamped down Hannity, and who was a logical opponent. But
I can imagine different.
So that was another bit of evidence.
I don't think that's very good evidence. I mean, first of all, you would think that on immigration, there they would reflect the worldview of their owner, Rupert Murdoch, right, who as a capitalist probably likes the idea of cheap labor as a matter of principle.
Well,
and on the Harriet Miers thing, I saw your evidence consisted of three people, Britt Hume, Mort Kondracki, and Fred Barnes, kind of defending the choice of Miers. But I don't know about Hume, but Fred and Mort are both evangelicals, right? And Harriet Miers' base was evangelicals, right? So it's natural that they would, right?
But Hume isn't. Certainly people
still, two out of three of your data points don't make any sense
Certainly
there.
people on the right were shocked that initially Fox took this anti-conservative, pro-Bush line. Now, yes, it could be, the immigration thing could be Rupert Murdoch. But anyway, the interesting thing is I got in this debate with this guy at the National Review and challenged him to come up with cases where Fox was independent, and he actually came up with a pretty good one. I hadn't realized that Fox broke the Bush DUI story in 2000. Was that during the primary? No, it was right before the election. Almost cost Bush the election. If you remember, it was pretty close. And
that's pretty shocking.
It is shocking, and it sort of shocked me. I guess the argument I'm going to have to make is, well, their affiliate stumbles upon this story. She also knows that other people in the press have the story. There's no way Fox can suppress the story.
Right.
The only question is, do they get credit for it or not get credit for it? It's going to hurt.
They saw what happened. They saw what happened in Newsweek with the Monica Lewinsky story.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the argument I'm going to have to resort to. But it actually is a pretty good piece of evidence that Fox is somewhat independent, has some independent imperatives, not just toadying to Bush. I still think my inside information is correct, and Ailes is a Bush toady. But
could be.
But I'm going to have to concede this possibility.
I certainly think that more people at Fox conceive of themselves in it basically as ideological operatives, if not party operatives, than is the case on the liberal side at places like CNN and probably even MSNBC. I mean, obviously, Rachel Maddow, Keith Olbermann, they're plainly ideological. But there's just something about Fox that's so kind of self-consciously framing the issues. I mean, I of course, on the other hand, I have to admit, I never watch it. But when I'm like, in the, like at the health club at the locker room, they have the TV on, and sometimes I don't watch enough cable news to recognize the voices or anybody or to know on those grounds what network it is. But sometimes just by the framing of the story, it just seems really right-wing or an obscure piece of news that's kind of being distorted for right-wing purposes. And I'll go, that's got to be Fox. And I'll look up and there's the Fox logo.
Well, sure, but, MSNBC is changing. You have this ideological top that's been imposed on this supposedly non-ideological or less ideological organization. And eventually, MSNBC, if present trends continue, will be just as ideological as Fox. I mean, clearly.
Well, and that's where the money is. There was a story in the Times today about how CNN finished in 4th place in prime time this month or something. And the people who are leading are the ideologues in prime time, MSNBC and Fox.
Well, right. That seems to be the way to get viewers these days. And I don't have a problem with that as long as they're independent. And I'm still not quite sure that Fox is completely independent. If Fox were run by Rupert Murdoch without Roger Ailes, I don't think I'd have a leg to stand on in claiming it's not independent. It would just reflect Rupert Murdoch and moguls.
But I think, the way you equate Fox with like the New York Times on the left or something, I think there's a massive asymmetry there.
There's a difference in degree.
No, I think it's more than that.
You don't think the New York Times wanted to elect Obama?
What's that?
You don't think the New York Times wanted to elect Obama?
Do I think that pervaded their news coverage?
Yes.
No, I don't. I think sometimes, the way I think of it is that, at some places like CNN and the New York Times, individual reporters, correspondents may sometimes say, wait, if I say this, my peers, the people I go to cocktail parties with are going to, that's crossing the line or that's taboo or something. I think that's different, though, from approaching every story with the idea like, okay, how do I serve this ideological cause or this? You've never worked at a newspaper, and I actually have, although a dinky one, and I think you sometimes underestimate the role that sheer repertorial pride and ambition play in getting people to follow.
Well, first I have worked at a newspaper.
What newspaper?
The Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, Bob.
As a real reporter?
Oh, now you're making fine distinctions. No, I was an editorial writer.
Oh, well, there you go.
But I was in the newsroom. The second point is I think the Times has changed. I think there was a time when a reporter who got the goods on Obama, suppose a reporter got the goods on Obama, big scandal right before the election, cost him the election. There was a time when the reporter would say, God, that was a great story. I'm going to win a Pulitzer for it. I'm going to hang Obama's scalp on my wall. I take great professional pride in uncovering this thing that nobody else uncovered. I think that was 20 years ago. I think now the reporter would have to be escorted from the newsroom under armed guard. Yes, the Times would publish it, but he would be really...
Do you have an example of that? Of a story that was suppressed before this election?
Sure, there's a famous example of it. A guy named Tim Golden had a series of scoops about your Senator Bob Torricelli during his re-election campaign when the control of the Senate was at stake, and Hal Raines spiked his stories because he felt he was editor of the New York Times.
Does Tim Golden testify to this?
Tim Golden is pretty pissed off. If you look at the clips, he said some things about how he thought they were good stories, and it's pretty well documented. And then the stories were picked up. The Golden sources got frustrated and went to a TV station. They published the story. Torricelli had to drop out of the race. So yes.
Well, first of all, I think Hal Raines was sui generis. Okay.
Oh well, he was only the editor of the New York Times.
Well, he was, but before him was Abe Rosenthal, who I think was a very different ideological character. I mean, you're
agree. That's how it's changed. 20 years ago was Abe Rosenthal.
But
now
Fox
it's Hal Raines.
is always on the right. Okay. And I don't. What I thought you were going to give me was some evidence that Bill Keller had done something before this latest election, but you don't seem to have anything.
No, I think Keller is more of a mixed bag, but I think
well, that's what I mean.
The mid-level editors at the New York Times during the Bush presidency, and maybe they didn't even realize they were doing this, were constantly looking for stories that undermined Bush. There was a campaign, general campaign. Of course, there were some dissenters to make Bush look bad, and they succeeded because Bush made himself look bad. I think it wasn't as strong as Fox undermining Obama, but it was clearly discernible.
He was the president. He is the natural target of inquiry. And, look, he was, I don't know how else to put this, he was an exceptionally, what's the word, bad, stupid, I mean, this just wasn't a typical presidency. He had been a disaster. He was doing ridiculous things like saying about insurgents who were killing American troops, bring it on, I want an insurgency. The man was a disaster, and he brought out an unusual degree of antipathy in, right-thinking Americans. So I don't think that says something about the institution of the New York Times.
I think both are true. And I think the Times was out to undermine him straight off from Florida. Now, the evidence on your side is that they wrote a story about the Florida recount that said Bush had actually won.
I mean, I guess I should say some kind of full disclosure thing at this point, which everybody knows anyway, which is that Blogging Heads has a relationship with the New York Times. But I would...
I don't think it's Fox News. I just think there is a bias there. It's a 20% bias, and Fox News is a 90% bias. But I think it's a scale. It's not a qualitative.
Well, there's one other thing I point to. Back when, this is, I guess, when Abe Rosenthal was still the editor, but this was when Hal Raines was the op-ed editor. And the New York Times, at least at that point, had what I thought was kind of a strange policy and got in my way sometimes, which is that if you had an op-ed piece that you wanted to write and it took the same line, broadly speaking, as what the editorial position of the New York Times was, that actually counted against it, okay? They were more eager to have things that on the op-ed page that counterbalance the editorial page. Well, that is not the hallmark of an ideological institution, like, for example, the Wall Street Journal, which has exactly the opposite policy.
I didn't realize that was their policy, but you're right. But
absolutely was.
But when he became editor of the paper, you've just said that, he's sui generis.
Well, I'm not sure that this was his a policy he implemented, or whether even at that point it came from higher up. But it was. But a very clear contrast is between the way the opinion sections are handled in the Wall Street Journal, Rupert Murdoch, and the New York Times.
Look,
and it's not. The difference isn't right and left. It's a difference between everyone singing to one tune at the Wall Street Journal and a much greater diversity.
There's a little bit more diversity at, when you talk about the editorial page, there's probably great diversity among reporters at the Wall Street Journal. You need an ideology to decide what stories to cover. Everybody has an ideology. If you think the problem with America is that the working poor aren't making enough money, you're going to write us stories about the plight of the working poor. That's perfectly legitimate. We're both journalists who mainly, when we were journalists, work for opinionated journals. Opinionated journals have ideologies. They see the world through a prism. There's nothing wrong with that. But and they're varying degrees. I don't have a problem with an ideological Fox News competing against ideological MSNBC. My problem was that having a non-independent Fox News. I don't even have such a problem with that. I just think it's a distinction.
It could be a distinction. You could be right. That's an empirical question, and I don't know. Anyway,
the war is winding down. But I was shocked that they had uncovered the DUI. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, the thing we don't have time to get into, an interesting question raised by all this is it just that Bush was an extreme, particularly polarizing president, or is there a longer-term trend toward polarization in America that's driven by the Internet and various things, and so that we are more and more going to be moving into a world of ideological media to the extent that media, per se, even survive?
Right. And I want to make if we can get to our final topic, there is an interesting wrinkle. Not only does the Internet encourage partisanship and the democratization of media encourage partisanship, but also does it encourage social equality. And,
excellent segue.
And I had written this thing where there was this exclusive elite site, a small world where distinguished people, i.e. rich people and investment bankers, and some really people who don't have money but are distinguished, could talk to each other, and this was going to be like this lucrative website as opposed to more democratic mediums like Facebook, and that it seems to be losing out to Facebook. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Right. Is your cell phone dying, or is mine, or what?
Something's beeping. I don't know what. Anyway, let's keep going while we can.
Yeah. Well, I first of all, is your only evidence that site is not working the fact that Harvey Weinstein sold his
well, it was widely
share in it? Because maybe he just needed the money, right?
It was widely considered to have.
Yeah. It sounds like it would fail. I mean, I think the naive thing about that venture. Well, I think the venture is probably premised on an underestimation of the extent to which that kind of social segregation just happens organically on the web. You don't need. It's not like the old days where the virtue of a separate physical space, like a country club or a club in New York, was that's the way people get together. I mean, the combination of things like email and Facebook and everything else make it so easy to construct your own virtual network, including exactly who you want in it, and listservs and so on.
I think it's not just that. Celebrities like to interact with ordinary people if they can do it without giving up privacy and being inundated. And a lot of celebrities use anonymous names to interact, and especially rich men who want to hit on women like to interact with the vast sea of people. And to that extent, in order to assert their status, they have to sort of semi-democratize themselves.
Yeah, but I don't think rich men generally hit on women online, right? Don't they? Well, maybe. What do I know?
I don't know,
about that?
But they to an encouraging extent, they go to bars and hire prostitutes and do other democratic things.
You said to an encouraging extent?
Well, it means it's not incredibly easy to translate wealth and social status into sexual superiority.
Oh, no, actually, I'm not
difficult.
sure superiority would be the word. Actually, it is, I think. I think, as they say, the reason they're using prostitutes is not, so they're paying them not to have sex, but to go away afterwards. In other words, it's not that it's so hard for men like that to attract women as it is to make it the kind of clean and largely anonymous encounter they want to make it without enduring commitment.
That's true, but I think some of them are paying them to have sex.
Well, that's part of it. There's certainly, yeah.
But there's an interesting question that involves not Harvey Weinstein, but Twitter that just came up today. Mm-hmm. Twitter is supposedly this democratic medium where like all these celebrities like Alyssa Milano and Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher go and they blog and they interact with ordinary people and they have millions of followers and isn't this great? It's a level playing field and it's weird. I posted the nastiest post I could write about John Klein, who's head of CNN, and it didn't show up in his search results, and it made me realize, of course, Twitter must censor what these celebrities, what's written about these celebrities. Otherwise, if you're Alyssa Milano or Demi Moore, your search results will be filled with like nasty comments about how you looked fat in that dress and you're ugly and your personal life and what was this thing with Bruce Willis. And if you've ever actually been in an actual democratic medium, there's like a whole bunch of crap that comes your way, and they have to filter this out for celebrities.
So I'm not sure I follow that.
It's a fake democratic medium. At least that's the thesis I'm working on.
I'm not sure I follow. You mean if I search for Demi Moore's name?
If you search for Demi Moore's name, there'll be a bunch of encouraging things. Hey, Mrs. Kutcher, way to go. Glad you're on the web. How about this show? Do you like that show? Congratulations on this. There won't be the really nasty, horrible, offensive comments that would be.
How are they filtering it? You think they've got human beings sorting through tweets and saying this one's too negative?
There was a story that I'll put up about how these celebrities all have a friend at Twitter. Part of being a successful celebrity on Twitter is you have somebody at Twitter headquarters who does unspecified favors for you. I assume that it was like, getting people who pretend to be you off the web and getting back your real name. But why isn't it also, marking various people as, this result will not turn up in your search results?
This sounds like a classic Mickey Kaus paranoid conspiracy theory, but you never know.
But
I would say, I'm not sure, I think Twitter would not want to intentionally mess with the integrity of its search results because it's finally operationalizing that as a revenue source. It's sold, I think it just sold rights to both, Microsoft Search and Google to do some kind of, searching on it, and that's apparently that could be the financial salvation.
But its growth has been really dependent on these celebrities promoting it. They really have to take care of these celebrities, and I think they do.
That sounds. I'm going to casually dismiss that. Okay, is that okay?
Well, we'll see. I may post something on it, and we'll see whether it turns out to be true or not. The easiest way to find out the truth is to post something that may or may not be true, right?
That's one way. I'm going to dismiss it out of hand, meanwhile, until you get some confirming evidence.
Will you do that?
But there's also a kind of a pseudo-social equality you see on things like Facebook, right, where people kind of like and maybe you do this, I don't know, and maybe someday I will, but it's like, you're in the, you're a content generator, you're like a journalist or something, and you want to call attention to your work. So you have all these friends that you don't actually know, and they say, hey, Mickey Kaus, I friended Mickey Kaus, and he friended me back or whatever. And then, meanwhile, of course, when you see their boring feeds, boring to you, coming into your thing, you hide them, so you are totally unaware of them, but they are following you. So it's basically a broadcast medium masquerading as a symmetrical communications medium, and that seems to me like you might object, right?
Well, I don't know. That's more like what Twitter is for me. You have a lot of followers, and very few people you actually follow, and you can't veto people who are your followers. They just sort of come.
Right. I mean, following is such bullshit.
Your friend.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
And do I feel that Twitter is horribly undemocratic in that sense? No. It's sort of, democracy doesn't eliminate that some people have more friends than others, and I'm sort of don't have many friends, but other people who are more interesting have lots of friends. That doesn't seem to be inegalitarian.
I'm just saying, friend is not the term if it's that asymmetrical. It's fans. It's a fan page masquerading as a friend page, which is okay, and maybe someday I will.
But that's
I
not
will
true.
myself be broadcasting.
It's like blogging. You can be a nobody and have a huge following. How many people knew about Glenn Reynolds before he started blogging up a storm? He's an obscure law professor at the University of Tennessee.
Right, but I think those days are gone when you can break into that medium that way. And I think I keep missing the ways when you can break in. Like, I think I should have started, either Twittering or something months ago.
I don't think those days are gone.
What do you recommend I break into?
I think if you're a good blogger, you'll get publicity. Whether it hasn't, the hierarchy hasn't ossified.
I think you have to start out better connected now.
You think? I don't know. I think you may have to whore after hits more. Like Mediaite has cracked the Technorati Top 40 by obsessively covering Glenn Beck and Megan Fox and Sarah Palin and whatever happens to generate hits. But but they broke in. They were nobody. Now they're somebody.
Yeah. So, at what point do you think people will start complaining that we've gone on too long?
But 6 minutes ago.
It's too bad. I wanted to chide you a little about something, but never mind.
Go ahead. Chide away.
No, it's just related. It's just that I noticed in these exchanges you had on your blog post about your Fox that you're now totally... your peer group is totally the right-wing bloggers. They're the ones who react to your work. They're the ones that you want to please. And that may be good, because one theory about how you wound up in the arms of the right is that it was your contrarianism that led you to keep saying things that annoyed the left. And if that's the case, then now that you consider the right your peer group, you will start saying contrarian things from their point of view and be driven back to the left, and there will be this nice pendulum swing, and maybe it'll be so slow that the leftward swing will last for the rest of your life, and then you'll just die on the left.
How does it show that my peer group is the right that I support public option healthcare reform and say that Roger Ailes is a tool of the Bushes?
That's now contrarianism from your point of view.
Well, there you have it either way.
In fact, every Jonah Goldberg...
I've always been for healthcare reform, and now you say it because it's a left-wing position, it's just me being contrarian. No, it's not.
But when Jonah Goldberg commented on your Fox thing, it was like, well, I usually agree with Mickey, something like this, with Mickey Kaus, but in this case he's gone too far. Well, when somebody on the right says that about you, I don't know. I think it's kind of self-explanatory.
I don't know. Right-wing people like me more than left-wing people, but Kevin Drum's written, things about me. They tend to say, I hate Mickey Kaus, but he's occasionally right these days, so I can't help it who reads me and who doesn't. I just call him as I see him, Bob.
You're sounding pretty defensive here,
play
Mickey.
it straight down the middle.
Did I get under your skin a little here?
Well, the problem is that I write these occasional left-wing things.
Did I touch a raw nerve?
And then I get these emails saying, Mickey, you're on a roll, you're finally making sense, and I immediately react against that and go back to the right.
Exactly.
So the left, so your theory doesn't work. Your theory is that I'll react because I'm part of the right, I'll go to the left. No.
I'm sorry to hear that, because what hope there was for your salvation lay in my theory being correct.
No, the love of the left scares me much more than the love of the right.
That is exactly the pathology I was hoping would disappear.
Sorry, it's persistent.
Okay, well, so happy Halloween. I should say, I think I should say that our commenters are to be applauded for some signs of civility. It's even reported that B.J. Keefe and Watford had recently, today, had a civil exchange, and I hope that tenuous peace is not broken down while we've been speaking. But they've really been good, and you don't pay enough attention to the site to know, but we had this kind of mock commenter court where a BHTV staffer was the prosecutor and I was the judge. It was about civility and so on, but you wouldn't know about that, so never mind.
What an incredible waste of your time.
Yeah, hey, I enjoyed it. The commenters were not so gratified, but I had a really good time. Do you know what you're going to be for Halloween, Mickey, before we sign off?
I don't. It sounds like from your lights I should just go as myself, Bob.
That would be frightening.
Exactly. No, I don't. I have to come up with a some high concept thing that the best costume I ever did was when Peter Barnard became editor of the New Republic. I dressed myself in a sheet with all the quotes that Marty Peretz had said about his incoming editors that he then fired, and I went as the ghost of New Republic editors past.
That's good.
But I'll never top that.
No. You might want to retire.
Okay. Anyway.
Okay. Well, go Phillies. Go Phils.
I guess.
Yeah.
I'm staying out of that one. Okay.
All right. See you
later.
around.
Bye.